which is challenging for all of us. And I'm sure many of us would have faced that there is a clear distinction between when we talk of K-12, especially when we talk of K-12 or when we talk of certain power skills that we fall short on evaluation. However, our entire system of education runs on evaluation. So if we say we use a Finland's method of evaluation, in India, it will become extremely challenging to convince the principals and parents. And I've noticed this time and again. So many of us then go back to Bloom's taxonomy and take help from Bloom that what is the kind of framework proposed. Revised Bloom taxonomy is another. So I'm sure some of you must have already looked at that. If not, that could be helpful. But that's not what our session is today. Let's take that what Prembhai was mentioning, that how do we create an evaluation method by understanding what our client end user has understood, what the parents of end user would understand as learning, because those are completely two different things. What a child may evaluate, a parent may evaluate totally differently. What a school principal would look at an evaluation would be completely different. And therefore, can we find a method by which we can go deeper from where we left last time? So last time we were talking about system study. We said, let's look at system as is. We, through observation, let's get into the root of it. Let's create hypothesis for the same and come up with what could be interesting insights. Now, today our objective is to go to the root cause. And in design thinking as an approach, the going to the root cause is the heart of design thinking. And therefore, sometimes design thinking is also called a human-centric approach. The moment we say human-centric, it means that what Prembhai was mentioning, can we go to stakeholders? And so today, if everyone is comfortable, we'll continue with his example to contextualize what does it mean. We'll also take other examples if you can share something in between so that we can contextualize to your area too. But let us, because evaluation is a common thing among all startups, how do we, Stanford maybe at their level, they may easily say that we do not evaluate and we do not recommend evaluating K-12. But I don't think an edtech in India will succeed if we say that we do not evaluate. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the most serious challenges. Yes, it may take us a decade to convince people that why we don't evaluate and why we should let the evaluation be more constructive rather than judgmental about certain things. So if we were to look at this aspect, let's begin by seeing a quick video and understand that if we were to, now what I want all of us to do is that let us take our startup, your own startup. Of course, you can keep Prembhai startup also in preview. And we are wanting to understand how do we find out what people want in terms of evaluation. And in that context, I'm sure all of us have already created a list of key stakeholders that matter for the success of our startup. So let us take those key stakeholders. The key stakeholders could be end user, parents, school, sometimes they could be government, sometimes there could be board, education board. So entirely up to you, based on your startup, whoever you think are the top 3 or 5 key stakeholders, please just recognize those. And in context of evaluation, how do we get to create a framework by using a human-centric approach? So let's see this video. Just a second. And of course, you will be familiar with the people I'm showing in the video. Some of you will be, otherwise we'll have a quick discussion. So we are using the method of empathy that to get to the root cause, or to get to, for right now, we are using empathy in order to understand how should we evaluate in context of what Prem Bhai mentioned. So let's look at the video and appreciate what is being said here. Three things are being said here. So please, I'll play it again if we miss, but otherwise let's listen to what's being said.
You know, there are three kinds of empathy. This really opened my eyes.
I didn't know it until I read it here, but yeah, right. three kinds of empathy.
Yeah, one is cognitive empathy. That means I understand how you see things, what your perspective is. You know that old saying, walk a mile and the other person's shoe. Technically, it means I know what mental models you have. I know what language to use, so you'll understand me.
Yeah.
So that's one complete set, and it operates in one part of the brain.
And almost impossible to be truly successful in the world without some of that.
Exactly. You've got to have that. You've got to have that.
Yeah. And lots of people have bosses who are not.
Absolutely.
Or managers who are not.
Yeah, or spouses
who are not, which makes for poor connection and bad
poor communication and a lot of problems like at work. The second kind is it's a different part of the brain. It's the social brain, we call it, and that's sensing in yourself immediately what the other person is feeling. That means rapport. And you're only going to have rapport if you pay full attention to the other person. You're going to have chemistry if both of you are paying attention. And if you're not, you're distracted. Oh, I'm checking my thing. Not going to happen. So there's this emotional empathy. The third kind is very important, and it's underrated. It's called empathic concern. It means if I have someone in my life who's in distress, I'm not just going to feel it, I'm going to want to help them because I love them. It draws on a third part of the brain, which is we call it the ancient mammalian system for parenting. Yeah. It's like a parent's love for a child. If you have that love for someone, then you're going to be there for them. And that's a different kind. It's different than cognitive, different than emotional.
Okay. So what can we make out from this, and how can we use this framework to create an evaluation? We could use the framework for anything, but since we have begun with evaluation as a continuing study, how can we use this approach? What were they talking about? Of course, the person shown there is Daniel Goleman, and Daniel Goleman is considered to be the father of emotional intelligence, and he has written enormous number of books and could be extremely useful for EdTech. Because the kind of things he proposes, the kind of models and frameworks he has proposed, emotional intelligence could play a very important role at each step of both learning, evaluating, retention, sharing things, could be extremely useful to all of us. So let's discuss quickly on what are the three things that he's talked about today in this small video, three kinds of empathy. And then we will discuss how can we use it. Yeah, anyone, what was the first kind?
Sir, it was cognitive empathy.
Yes, excellent. So the first one is the cognitive empathy. Cognitive is thinking, we all know. Now, what does cognitive empathy mean is that all of us have mental models. Like, for example, if your stakeholder is a parent has a mental model. What is a mental model? Before we even reach them, a parent thinks online education is boring. That's it. That's a mental model. Now, we do whatever, we speak whatever, we say that that's the future. In future, there'll be no schools, there'll be everything online, whatever we may say. If a mental model of a parent is that I have seen online education, and I'm not saying that our online model is not good, but the parent has tasted the school model where the child was taught online and has created their own mental model. Now, come whatever we may, it's extremely difficult for us to convince this person that no, my product is good. Whereas at the same time, suppose somebody has made a mental model that by giving one exercise per week to a child, the learning will happen or not. We all know that sometimes one small interaction in a child's life leads to him or her taking a career in that area. Now, those are, again, how do we make those things impactful? But these are mental models. Now, if we are able to understand the mental models of the stakeholders whom we are going to serve, and these are standard things that people talk about. For example, Piaget and Vygotsky. I'm sure many of you, because we are in EdTech, we know about them. Piaget and Vygotsky are popular names. One of them said that we learn by seeing from peers and environment. Others said that we influence the environment and learn from it. Both of them are correct. Both of their approach is correct. However, both of them have this mental model. Now, if we have a mental model like this, then how do we structure our startup? Let's take the evaluation method. If we have a standard, first thing, evaluation may say, somebody has looked at Tremblay's things and said, that's wonderful. Can you connect
अंकुश का फोन
can you connect the evaluation of the whatever you are teaching? Can you connect this evaluation with the school board evaluation? That is somebody's mental model. They say, for us, it is the final evaluation that happens at the end of the year, which matters to the parent. So can your product connect it with the end of the board for evaluation? Now, that's somebody's mental model. We can't do anything about it. We are just trying to understand that what is their this quick exercise, friends. I'm sure you have written 3 stakeholders. I mean, since we begin with evaluation, let's take that, but you could actually take up any topic. You could take the hypothesis. Now, today we are taking hypothesis on evaluation. You may take a hypothesis around the product or service. You can take a hypothesis around variables present in the lean business canvas, or you can take hypothesis on a business model, and then check that what is the mental model. Like, let us say we want to partner with someone. No, I hope I hope you're understanding where I'm driving at. The whole process of empathy could be used anywhere. However, we are starting with evaluation because we were on that, but it could be used for anything. Like, for example, if you want to partner with a key partner with an organization, what is the mental model of that decision maker in that organization? And I'm sure all of us are familiar that the kind of venture funds we are seeking sometime, each of them have their own specific mental model. So there is no standard template. We get to see a template, but I'm sure you would agree that before you go for Sequoia Fund, you will actually try to see that, oh, what is their model, mental model and expectation? What is the mental model of people sitting in Shark Tank in India? And how is it different from there? These are mental models. So let's take this exercise and let's identify one key stakeholder. I would suggest we should take 3. One is our end user, whoever it is going to be. Second is we should take a decision maker, that who's the key decision maker in our thing. And if we are going B2B, then of course, what's the influence? If parent is the decision maker, but if the school is facilitating the entire thing, then what is the mental model? Now, of course, we are on a formal platform, but I can very well tell you, many of you would have already experienced that when you go to the school, sometimes there are an interest of school also involved. Now, if we, and that is not standard. Some of them have it, some of them just don't have it. But that's a mental model. The moment we approach someone and you may say, see, we will, because of the school's effort, we will pay you 20%. The guy may suddenly get annoyed. And they may say that, forget about what you're saying. We don't need anything. Pay that to the child. And we may go very honestly to some school and say that here we have given best price to the child. But to do that, we are not able to give it to the school. They may get offended. So these are mental models. And if we are not clear about the mental, now here we were talking about mental model for anything. It could be mental model for partners. It could be mental model for revenue channel, revenue stream that we want to create. It could be the mental model for channel of or distribution. It could be the mental model on the cost structure. Do we go for subscription-based model? Do we go for one-time model? Do we use different models at different progress of our journey, startup's journey? So let us take 5 minutes and maybe 5 or 10 minutes, because this is very critical to understand. And then we'll come back that how do we actually, I'm only saying first aspect, cognitive empathy, not the other two. We'll come to those also. But let's just take up cognitive empathy, which means a mental model. I mean, to make it even more simpler, I'll say sometimes we have bosses who say, I believe people never work. So to make them work, you have to have a carrot and stick. And there are others who say that, no, I completely believe in that people are here to work and there is no other. These are mental models. It's extremely difficult to convince one from the other. If we are as startups aware of this mental model, we can then structure our startup and our product service and our communication and strategies in a way that we move smoothly. Here we are coming back again to evaluation. For Prembhai, you use this for select 3 stakeholders and just apply this mental model and tell me what mental models do people have, these 3 key stakeholders in context of evaluation. Others, I think, friends, we can apply to any most important area of your startup. If you think product recognition is the most important, then please let's apply it to 3 key stakeholders. If you think key features are the most important for your startup, let us apply it to that. Yeah, let's do that quickly, friends. If you want to continue with evaluation, it's perfectly fine, because since we picked that up. Yeah, in the meantime, somebody wants to discuss and it's fine, but otherwise we are into the exercise.
All right. You want me to go ahead, sir?
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, okay.
Take 5 minutes. Don't quickly jump at conclusion, because empathy is not so. Otherwise, it will be our mental model that we superimpose on the key stakeholder. So take a minute and just really honestly think through that what could be that. You have already thought through, I know that, but if you may give some chance to others, 5 minutes,
Yes,
if not 10.
Please,
Yeah.
No problem, sir. Yeah.
Yes, Saurabh, you're correct. It is putting ourselves in other person's shoes. Right now, we are talking about how they think, their mental model. We'll come to other aspects also, emotional, and then the feeling-based one. So social, we'll come to that soon. But let's focus right now on the thinking part.
So Rohit, probably
Yes.
I could get started with some of my perspectives, right? It's very very interesting to have this cognitive mental model. But honestly, I've not thought through that initially, right? So now when looking at reflecting on what we are doing, see, one of the key feature which we have is gamification, right? So we try to gamify stuff. So if you look at from a, look at 3 key stakeholders. One is the user, that is a student, and one is a parent, and other one is, of course, we have key influencer, that's the schools, right? And of course, in the school, it is it's one of your computer science teacher or one of your head teacher, whatever maybe, right? So now, if you be a student, definitely they would like to play games and win and get awards and recognition. And of course, that immediate gratification. So they definitely want to win. And what next? And what do they do with the points which they earn? Right. So it's more about from their mental model perspective, how do I win points faster, and how can I redeem those points so that I can be a champion in front of other friends, right? So that is
excellent.
That is a mental model from a student perspective. If we look at from a parent perspective, they may feel it's all about just game, right? Why there's no learning in it, right? They're just playing, right? They're already playing computer games, so they may feel it as this is another game, right? Why should I give money to make him to play another game? Because I'm trying to take away the devices from him. You are trying to make him addict on devices again, right?
Excellent.
So we have to address how do we communicate this in a subtle way, that gamification in the context what we are talking, and of course the general perception of games, right?
Excellent.
in the mind. And from a school, or from a school or somebody who's an influencer perspective, their mental model is very similar to a parent. They may say, okay, show them how they are, getting better at their scores, right? Show me what are their, how much they are, scoring, right? Who are the top 3 or who are top 10, right? So from a school perspective, they don't really bother about gamification. They are really bothering about what is that the child have learned. Show me that their progress, right? What they have learned. So they least bothered about gamification. They're only bothered about, because since we are facilitating or we are influencing, show me that what impact it is creating on children, what impact it is creating on the school as overall positive, right? So it's a very different mindset of in a school and the student and the parent, indeed.
Excellent. So thanks, Prasad bhai. In fact, a few years back, I was invited in Korea to help their education system de-addict children from gaming.
Yeah.
Now, if we take a product saying that it is a game, and if unfortunately we write on the box that it is on computer, then we are dead in Korea, because the people have seen such kind of negative impact that game has had. I'm not saying educational games, but the word game itself, people have suddenly, the moment that word comes to our mind. Now here, I think, because I greatly appreciate what you just said, let's take it up in a little different manner. Let us say we talk about the game, the matrix that we want to create about cognitive empathy, and on the first aspect, the term game that we want to promote. Now, one is the communication of our startup. And at the same time, if we may all agree, it may also be that there's a different mental model on evaluation. And then, so the first promotion of the game, the evaluation of the game would have different mental models of people at different levels. So what we can take from what Prasad bhai was mentioning is that the communication of a startup or positioning of a startup will also have a significance on mental model of people. The outcome may also have a significance. And third is that the larger impact upon society may also have a different mental model. So in order to address this, what should a startup do? And that is what we are trying to see here. That can we get into the mind of the key stakeholders in order to understand both, I would say, possibilities as well as challenges in context of our startup. For example, when Prembhai was saying coding, I have seen huge lot of parents who really get excited by the word coding, but equally good number of parents who say that's overstretched. Let's not teach a 4-year-old, 5-year-old coding. They will learn as they grow at a certain age. And that is entirely our mental model. There is no right, wrong. We are not debating on it, because as startups, we don't have a right to prove a right or a wrong. We just need to understand how do we get our first customer and first rupee. We may, over a period of time, convince the market to what we believe in. But to start a startup, and this is the classic mistake sometimes that happens in startups. We get so much of material saying that we should prove what we do, and things like sentences like create a dent in the universe. It is fine. The universe does not need a dent. Actually, we need to get our first buck. We need to set our startup. Now that tells us that we need to be humble enough to understand our key stakeholders. One of the key things, and I think on this platform we have very mature founders. Otherwise, it becomes a big challenge to convince a third-year student of engineering that you've created a great thing, but nobody is actually wanting what you are doing. Go and check it out. What you are saying and what they are saying is completely contradictory. So thanks, Prasad bhai. We take your first thing here, Now we move to the second one of what he said, emotional empathy. The first one was, so for the benefit of everyone, I'll just share the screen and move on from here, is the social or empathy, emotional, social, that is more on based on the feeling of people. Now, how do we create a matrix like this? If you see on the screen, we can actually create a matrix on key stakeholder 1, 2, 3. We can have cognitive, emotional, social, and empathetic concern on this side. And then we can create this kind of matrix for different aspects like we were discussing of our startup. It could be product service, it could be partner, it could be key activities, it could also be the team. It's extremely important for a startup to look at what kind of team we want to have. And now the cognitive model of many startup founders would be we are 24/7, 365. But the team, that when we go out to hire the team, the first question those people ask is, what are the working hours? So the mental models are different. Now, one cannot say, no, we are 24/7, 365. Yes, it is good. I keep saying that, but then not many people actually understand what they mean. So it could be related to the team we are hiring. It could be related to the marketing activities and communication we want to do. It could be related to operations. Like I said, Piaget and Vygotsky's thoughts that child impacts the environment and learns through it, and the other is saying the child sees others and environment and learns from it. Both are completely correct. How do we use that framework in educational pedagogy for learning? So those things would also be important. So now let's come to the next thing. And would anyone want to share upon the social feeling and emotional empathy? And how do we use it for our startup?
Yes, sir. So this is happening, as I could see through the last few days, aligned with it. I started calling up a few people and engage them in the discussion, telling them what I'm trying to do and how I think it could help them, which is, using the first technique. So if I was them, how it would help. And then sensing as through the conversation, their intonation on how the energy levels shifts is to understand what is actually happening, is being mindful of what the other person is feeling. And typically, the next thing, if I see that, the person is not giving up, okay, tell me more about it or something, then I know that the person is being a little bit defensive. So then I'm saying that, okay, I'm not, selling out anything. This is not a sales call. It is just to understand, if you understand about this. So, if we do something, create a concept or a pilot out of this, would it help? And that suddenly changes the discussion, right? Then they're a little bit, okay, if you do pilot, okay, there's no commercial pressure, there's no risk. And it's just more of a collaboration. And as some of them, I even told them that this is part of the academic study and the exercise that I'm doing here as part of the masterclass. So there I felt that people are more appreciative and they open up a little bit more, rather than just the fact that you tell them I'm doing this and they think like, okay, I have to either pay some money or I have to do something, I have to do some extra work, and they suddenly clam up. So I realized that being that socially present and mindful of what is happening can change the discussion. You could either convert it into an opportunity or you could lose it altogether. And this is what is happening.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. So when we move to the second stage, and all of this, friends, I hope we are not misunderstanding this only for communication. We are not talking marketing. We can actually take up creating an education pedagogy and use these. Let's take a child and say, what are the mental models child has in terms of learning, in terms of physical learning, in terms of motor skill usage, in terms of coding, anything. Same way, when we talk about the feeling, we can, what Saurabh was mentioning is interesting. Once the mental model is known, so my request to all of us would be, since this masterclass is actually meant for a scientific approach, I would call it a scientific and creative approach to startup creation. Because so if we are able to create a matrix that says that these are the 5 mental models of my key stakeholder, and choose the key stakeholders, then we come to feeling. Because what people say and what people do is completely different sometimes. And those, so saying comes from the brain and doing comes from the habits. So sometime when we see, people will say that we absolutely believe with you that you are not evaluating a child is perfectly fine. But when they have to come to convince their principals, they'll say, but their model doesn't evaluate. How will we convince parents? So what people say and do sometimes is different. And therefore, let's now get into the feeling side of it. What is the feeling people have? So if we take Saurav's example, the mental model is every school principal every year gets 100+ proposals. So the moment a proposal has reached them, which could be print very nicely created document, which we have sent, it will go to the stack of principal's desk if it is treated as a proposal. However, I'll cite here an interesting case study. Maybe this will help many of us. Way back, I think almost 20 years back, a company, before it became, so there's a company called Accenture, consulting firm, one of the top consulting firms, Arthur Andersen, which became Accenture later on. So Arthur Andersen wanted to reach the CEOs of the top Fortune 500 company. And so they were worried that if we write a letter to the CEO, it's going to go to the secretary. The secretary will evaluate the letter and decide whether it should go to the principal or not. And the secretaries are quite dangerous people in that regard, especially in EdTech. I think, I mean, you should try this out and you'll realize that it's easier to get in touch with the government offices than getting to the principal. So they had the same challenge. How do we reach a CEO? So then they did a whole exercise where they wanted to get into the mental model, the emotional feeling, and the social model, and also empathetic concern. And they realized that most of the CEOs would be, I'm talking about roughly 20, 25 years back, maybe 30. Most of the CEOs would be 55 plus or 60 plus. So that was one of the things they kept in mind, not the current generation of CEOs, but we're talking of 30 years back, that era. So 60 years back, so 60 years CEOs. Then they thought, what do CEOs love to do? So they said they found out that CEOs love to tell stories to their grandchildren. At one level, as humans, we are all, when they at 60, then if they are grandparents, they would want to narrate some interesting story to people. And then they thought that, okay, if that's the feeling, then how do we create a message that will reach the CEO? Because these two things are fine, but what do we do? So they created a fantastic box in which there was a whole experience of underwater scenario, fishes. And the person would open the box and then they can move the fish and create their own stories as environment. And the box would be sound, there would be sound that would also be there. So if they open it, it will be sound of the sea and water, the underground water. And so all that experience they created, this was all a book kind of. That time we're talking of no UI, UX of that kind. But when this box reached the desk of the secretary, she saw that this looks like beyond my comprehension. It has to go to the CEO because it looks very, very elite and it looks like some gift has been sent to him. So let me not open. In fact, when they even opened, they realized that this is something really unique. It has to go to him. So the moment the CEO receives it and he opens, he hears that experience of story that narrate your own story to the grandchildren and take them through your experience as a CEO, create, like we have our Panchtantra stories that are being narrated. So narrate this story through your experiences to grandchild. And at the end, it said that we also help companies develop strategy and operations for the future. So we are Arthur Andersen. And what they realized that out of 500, 350 CEOs personally got back through a letter saying that this is awesome what you are sharing. I would definitely want to spend 15 minutes with you. Let's catch up. Now, this is a very, very simple, small thing of how a startup can actually use the cognitive, social, feeling, emotional, and empathetic concern. Empathy here, if we see, all three are working in favor of creating that communication. So as a startup, I would say at a starting point right now, just a minute, Saurabh, I'll come back. As a starting point, can we consider our basic startup solution and look at it through the lens of this that we have been discussing? The basic, I mean, I'm not saying what I narrated is how do you reach that the CEO or a principal, but let's use this at a very elementary stage. For example, a few weeks back, a startup had come and he was very excited with this young guy, very excited with his idea for the school. I said, okay, take it, let's go to the school next door and give it to a child and see what he's doing. The moment he gave this entire very interesting combination of mobile and physical thing to read OCR and then recognize thing and then move to the next level, suddenly he realized that actually the board that he had made, he was selling the entire thing as a board. The children just put that board aside and start using the table, and they were equally able to do the stuff on a white paper. So now he realized that the biggest cost in my thing was the board, where the child is not using the board, just a white paper is doing equally good. And he was convincing me about the board that we should have a very beautifully designed wood crafted board which does this thing. The children just put it aside. Now the learning from there, of course, here we'll see this in prototyping, but the learning here is that sometimes the way people use a product or educational program, a product could be completely different than the way we think. Okay, so we come back to Saurabh and hear what he has to say or ask. Yes, Saurabh.
Right, sir. Thank you. So on this point, the previous one before the prototyping was that coming to the empathetic concern also, which is a third point.
Yeah.
And this case of the CEO and reaching them, is it better that before we start to tell them what the solution is and what technology and what not, is it better to build a level of trust, which is what I feel this guy did in the first place, that he understood that a little bit of psyche, not that what they were trying to do, but who these are as people, right? And like you explained that these are people who will grow old and want to tell stories. That is what they want to be. That is what their aspiration is, and not who they are as CEOs, running finances and big meetings and all of that stuff and talking, across the board, right? So that's the question. So how do we come out of that and then apply that to our cases? For example, if we're trying to sell it to a principal, for example, right? So,
Yes.
so how do we do that? Is not talking anything about technology or what we are doing.
Excellent point there. There's a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why.
Yeah.
If some of us can actually look at that book, it's very, very interesting. In fact, before you look at the book, just look at his video on starting with why. It's become one of the very, very popular concepts, and he's connected most of the top companies that Apple doesn't sell computer. Apple used to say that we are giving you a bicycle for the mind. No, so you can use this bicycle for your mind and do whatever you want. By the way, how do you do that is use our computer. With organizations starting with why and then what and then how, he has structured this interesting concept which could be very useful to what you were saying, that do we connect to the larger cause? Like, for example, I'll share with you, you tell a school that we have a phenomenal innovation product that actually connects with NASA's competition. And if you take this product at the end of the year, I think at least one of your teams can get into that competition. The principal will definitely sit up and listen. vis-a-vis saying that we have a phenomenal innovation program and it'll do a great good to your child. They'll become innovative, creative. These skills will develop. They are not listening because they have heard these stories many times before in presentation. So your point is phenomenally correct. And the successful startups are the ones that actually understand the consumer to this level. What you were just saying, can we get down to this level? How do we do that? I'll share with you some interesting tools and techniques to do that. Those are very, very common tools, techniques used both in Kaizen, Six Sigma. We'll see those, we'll use those here. But I hope the first part that I wanted to emphasize today has been understood well. That's the most important. Tools are all open source everywhere in the world. Just Google and say, how do I understand my, to an extent, if you just say, how do I want to understand the mental models of principles in India, I'm sure Google will have enough, Bing will have enough resource on it. But Manas, just coming for a minute, just give me a minute. So the first part was that empathy is a loosely used term when we talk about empathy in a general thing. We generally hear empathy means that understanding others, understanding what people are doing, talking to them to get into depth. But if we are able to create a framework for each of our stakeholders, for each of the tasks that we want to achieve, like in case of Saurabh, you're saying presenting to a principal or someone, that's a task. Showcasing my product first time, for example, if we are creating an online platform, the moment somebody gets on our platform, the first impression of UI also involves all this that I'm talking about. The first button that we click will also involve what I'm talking about. So that's the kind of work that actually, or let's come to our core product, our core educational offering in the pedagogy, in the framework, in the approach will also require understanding users to this extent. A child in grade 4 could be extremely different from a child in grade 5. But having said that, a child in grade 4 in different parts of the world are different from each other. So, and each of them have their own different mental model that could decide the term that total market size to subsequently the size of market we want to serve. Another principle, sometime we'll discuss Tom, Som, Sam in future, but it could be used there. So this whole concept, Prembhai, I hope you are with us on the evaluation also. This is going to play one of the very important roles. But before that, let's go to Manas, and he had something to share.
Yeah, actually, my major concern was that whenever you are trying to target a school or somewhere, right, principals do not usually have a very much say on decision making. In India, it is like 99% of the private schools, they are run by some owner, and he's making the decisions. And usually in these scenarios, the owners is not even concerned about what's going on in the school.
Yes.
So that becomes a very weird scenario for us to sell, because we don't know who exactly the customer is. We go to the owner, he says go to the principal. We go to the principal like we have to talk to the owner.
So I completely understand and empathize with you in totality that few years back there was a startup that came with a similar challenge, and then how they cracked it. I mean, I'm not saying that you can use it the same thing. We can come up with our own way. But what they said is that our team who wants to come to present is going to be there on this day only for couple of hours. We want to come, and can we have a joint meeting between the principal and the trustee for just that? We'll need trustee for 15 minutes. The principal can be with us for an hour, and our team will fly back. Now, I don't know whether they really genuinely meant it, that the team is flying in and so we have limited time, or was this just a story? But it did work for them. That they felt, oh, you're coming from Delhi to Bangalore and you have just 2 hours of travel, and it is something, but equally important is what are we then communicating? Is the trustee really interested in what we are saying? So it's at different levels. It's not so easy it's going to be different for different startups, but that is exactly what we are trying to do here.
Yeah, actually, what we were planning to do is we were planning to, like most of these owners and trustees are very conscious about the brand.
Yes.
So I was thinking that, obviously as a startup, we don't have the huge funds which it requires, but if, a couple of startups can get together in this industry, all right, and most of the, founders are, interested in, how I can save my brand, how can I build the brand of my school, right? So basically, if we can, create a kind of a webinar, not a webinar, meeting with them, all right, where we create a campaign around a particular city, like let us say I select the city of Agra, for example, and I say, okay, build your school brand, all right, how to build your school brand or how to brand your school, and we get some, person who is into branding, and then we ask all these school people to come there. Obviously, it will not be a free event for them. They will have to buy the tickets for it, because if it's free, it doesn't carry any value, right? So what we do is we hire a motivational speaker, something like that, who's into branding, who's into marketing, right? And then we invite them that, okay, we are the sponsors. The cost of the ticket is 2,000 rupees. If you purchase it from us, we'll give it to you at 1,000 rupees, whatever. So we'll try to make up the cost with that amount itself. Invite the school or the management for the point of view that we are talking about brand building. We'll have the person talk about the brand building activities. And after that, rather than, because even if we go to a school and we tell them, okay, we are offering gamification, we are offering this thing. So what the school principal do, he'll understand your part and he'll start searching on net and go to some other player, right? So to prevent that scenario, we have to broadcast ourselves as we are the one of the, we have knowledge about what we are talking.
Yeah.
Right. So what we can do is that, we can go to a school, tell them that, this is the scenarios which the school might be facing out and how we have resolved it. So whatever services we are offering, we create a bigger problem for them and show it as a bigger problem along with the branding activity. So we link our product with the branding activity, which will help them ultimately increase the number of students.
Sure. So if you're asking me, I may not be.
So this is the approach which I'm planning to actually implement. If you could give me some feedback on that.
That's the problem, because my job is actually to give you frameworks, methods, tools, techniques. I would say the answer lies in the stakeholders. And that would be my personal request to everyone. Over these last 10 years of my being in the startup, I've realized experts are not the best people to take advice from. The advice actually comes from the end user, and in doing and implementing and testing it out. So if you think that it is a successful thing, let's create a low-cost prototype of what you just spoke and test it out with 5 schools. Because some of the startups and some of the ideas, sometimes the best of the ideas are not appreciated by experts simply because their experience says it may not work. But it is those ideas actually that make to the world. So my request would be that if you feel like that, you check it out on the platform. Karan can help but do it rather than sharing that model to me. It may look impressive on the face of it, or it may we can find pitfalls here and there, but actually I think we should do it. And so what you said, if some of the startups agree to join hand and want to do something like this, the first step itself will give us answer. First thing is, do other startups want to come with us? And then what are their worries? I mean, do each startup feel that, oh, that person will get a benefit, my thing will be left out, so I'm okay going alone? Now, they are also correct. And on the other hand, some who join hand are also correct for the same. So I think it's in the doing part. I'm sorry, Manas, actually, it may not be wise to give recommendation. And I've stopped doing that, honestly. I would say that let's brainstorm. if this is the case, let's sit together for a group of 5-6 people. Let's discuss what you are saying, come up with their views also, and just let's do the first pilot and check it out. Yeah, but yes, what you said, I can help on the frameworks that we can use. So right now, I think what we were discussing I hope, Manas, that's fine. Yeah, and also one request, please do not fall to the quick fix solution industry. That's very short-lived, kind of. Our answers should come from our users and stakeholders. If we get answers there, I think we will definitely succeed. So that's the iterative approach that we use in design thinking. Now, coming to these 3 frameworks that we saw, how do we actually go to the root cause of something? So if you recall, in the last time we said that by observation, we can go to the root cause when we saw that toothbrush example uh, that we actually went to the field and saw. Now, in this case, there are certain questions that we can use to ask our key stakeholders to understand both the mental model, the social emotional empathy, and empathetic concern. Now, just before we go there, empathetic concern could be very, very important for the end user. Sometimes the educational ethics play a big role there. Empathetic concern could be if my product is being used aggressively by children, what is the empathetic concern that I should have, the children will have, and the parents would have over a period of time of using the same. So do I also recognize the boundaries to which what commitments I'm going to make, or the boundaries to which I should stretch the model as a startup? So equally important when we create a startup is knowing that what are is the framework in which my startup will work, what are the things I can do, and what are the things I just can't do. Both in terms of our product offering as well as, so having that empathetic concern from end user perspective and key stakeholder could also give us a direction that what our startup is speaking. Now with that, let's now move to the next stage, that since now we have understood the top 3 a kind of empathy and broken it down into these 3 components and then studied for each one, how do we go about doing this? So this whole domain of study is called ethnographic study, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. So we use very simple yet very, very effective questionnaire technique from Kaizen. So I'll just share that thing with you. But in the meantime, what we can do is, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this term called persona. When we look at a profile of our customer segment that we used to do, like demographic, psychographic, and those, in ethnographic study, we use a method called persona. And this is what persona actually is. By the way, BG is background. So what do we do here is that before we go to empathize with a specific stakeholder, we create the first level of persona, that how do we understand our key stakeholder. Now, therefore, you see the term here is fictionalize it, because right now we do not know them. This is our understanding before we even approach them. That's the first level of persona. Once we meet them, we try to gather answers to these things shown on the screen at the second level, that is the second persona. And then once we have carried out, let's say 10 in meetings with one key stakeholder, like let's say 10 principals of different school, then we create a persona which becomes a representative of that specific segment. So creating a persona is the starting point of understanding our key stakeholders. So while I can share, what you can do is, if you want, you can actually take a print screen of this. And in the meantime, I'll quickly search for the Kaizen questions I wanted to share with you in a minute. But let's do this exercise for one of your key stakeholders. And what I want you to share with me is that by doing this exercise where you looked at these terms, interest, needs, values, powers, behavior, and aspiration, could you come up with one better understanding about your key stakeholder from before we got to the class today? So if you may take a print screen, and then let's take it for each one and try and address and create one quick persona. And while you go through the term, let's see which new thing emerges from the same. Okay. Yeah, I hope you've taken a print screen. If not, I'll again share. Yeah, please do take a print screen. Just by using this specific persona, so when we go to understand the cognitive, social, emotional, and empathetic concern, we first create a persona like this for our key stakeholders. So could we arrive at anything interesting when we went to create this persona? Anyone, friends?
So Rohit, probably I may start. Others can follow.
Yes, please.
So I don't know whether I could also share something which I did some time back.
Oh, absolutely, please.
So here is John, right? John is somebody who is 11 years old in class 6. So the few things, which is very interesting, which we could see most of the children today, they need autonomy in learning, right? Which is an important aspect, which I felt as well as I could see through my daughter, right? So they don't want to be told what to be done, right? So they want to be self-organized, self-paced autonomy, especially when they want to explore something new, right? So that is something which is a key characteristics. Anything which they want to explore new, they want to try by themselves. They want to make their hands dirty. And so they're quite curious always. The children are always curious. So the whole objective is how to make them more curious and make them to remain curious, right? So curiosity and self-learning and autonomy are the key dimension of a persona which we see, and especially children who is emerging. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. I think this could be extremely useful to many of us here, that how you as a startup created a specific persona for a child from the learning perspective. A similar thing now, friends, we could actually do from what Manas was saying, that can be by creating personas of startups, founders, principals, branding expert. And before we talk to them, we get to understand a little bit about them. Now, I'll just move on because of paucity of time. I found the questionnaire I wanted to share with you. And this is a questionnaire generally that is used in Kaizen. And what we tend to do is, once we create the persona, we use this simple 5WNH technique. And all these questions mentioned here could lead to interesting empathetic understanding of those people. It could just be a simple task that they do. However, it can be helping us to create and frame our own set of questions. And what we tend to do is that when we meet these people, we initiate the entire discussion based on the topic we are discussing through these 5WNH. And generally, why we use 5WNH on interviewing and talking to people is it will give us a horizontal width of answers. And so it will be that we'll not miss out on any specific area or domain of a topic that we are discussing. So 5WNH is an extremely, and it is simultaneously used in Six Sigma also, as well as in structured approach that we are using for innovation, creating startups, using design pedagogy. So I hope you will later on, I would expect that if we can apply this to our key stakeholders. for a specific topic. Like right now, Prasad Bhai mentioned on knowing a child, and he showed us the persona. Now, if we were to go to the child to understand those things that he shared with us, we could begin by using this approach of 5WNH as a starting point. And what it helps us also, that these could be very general, quick answers that can come to us. Now, once we do that, and of course, this will be available to you. Once we do that, but the key is that by asking this 5WNH, we will only get a direction. What Prasad Bhai showed us does not come from these 5WNH. Yet it can come, because if we are intelligent enough to interpret what answers we are getting, then it will come. But that raises the next question. How do we get to the insight? So some of the interesting techniques that are already available on the internet, things like fishbone diagram, lotus blossom, or the one that I'm sharing here, very, very most common and easiest laddering technique used by psychologists. It's nothing but asking 7 whys. Just asking the why question on the answer that we receive. For example, in case of Manas, if we talk about principles, why do principles behave in a certain way, we will get the reason, or why do principal and trustees sometimes don't come to the same meeting. We start from that. The answer that we may get will give us first answer. We again apply the why question on it, and then we'll get an answer, and then we again apply the why question of it. What it does is, by the level 5 to 7 is the very basic reasons why people do what they do. So it is not just, should not be treated as a technique just for the root cause. Each step of it tells us what to do. For example, let us take an example of any educational startup advertisement that you see. The ad does, when you do the laddering of knowing a persona or a specific topic, each step answer that are coming actually can be used in communication. For example, what age child should I show in the advertisement can come at one of the why answers. How do they behave can come at the next answer. Third is, what kind of environment that they live in can come as a next answer. And when we go to the root, what is actually they look for? So for example, why does Dove soap have to show white background with common people and show softness in a certain way? It is all by laddering that one went through understanding the consumer, that what age person should I show? What kind of, why white as compared to, in other countries, would that white be black? Or does the dove itself is white, so our background needs to be represented like that? What is the emotion that a person is asking for? Now, these answers come by using the laddering technique, as I'd like to show. I'll come to these, yeah, here. Getting to a specific root cause. Now, many of the startups can use this whole technique in a very different way too. We can have some of the companies, I mean, many of us must be familiar, do not accept a solution or a problem that we take to the organization unless we have done the 3 whys ourselves. So here, beyond these 5WNH, once we get a direction, we have, now this will give us a variety of answers with stakeholders. We pick up the one that we find is interesting and we want to dwell further, and we apply the laddering technique here. Simply asking the question. I personally request that please do this exercise. This is, and when you do this exercise, you can actually work in a team of 3. And before we go to our end user, let's create a questionnaire using 5WNH, and then at least 5 different direction questions using 7 whys we go prepared with. And if we do this bit on the most, and what you can actually take up is that what is the most challenging thing that you are finding today in your startup journey? Take that as a challenge, and uh, it would definitely involve a stakeholder. So let's choose that stakeholder, create a persona, create 5WNH using Kaizen's approach, and then use laddering. And let's see where it helps us go. This method, for example, it can be used anywhere. But why we are using it under empathy is that we want to understand the cognitive, social, and empathetic concern of people. And using this approach here will give us a deeper understanding of thinking, behavioral, and social, as well as a deeper insight into what people actually want. And I think that's the key for a success of every startup. Now, quickly dwelling to 2 points before we open to again question and discussion. The key of achieving this is not going to be rushing into a situation. So this is a classic model of whenever we use the method of ethnographic questioning to someone, if this is time and vertical is effort. If we look at this, asking a question to people comes here. But before we get into, we have to move in a way. If you see here, the time to introduce ourselves, introduce the project, rapport building, making them start sharing certain stories and experiences, and then getting into the emotion and feeling of those people, and then asking question is a classic approach to getting insights. Now, it's not a very easy thing to do. We need to rehearse and practice a little bit. There are experts for this area. However, I think all startup founders should actually be good at gaining insights, because I think that's our job. Gaining insights for any area is the key to a success of any startup founder. And it is expected from the founders that we'll have the insight. So this is the way generally we approach the stakeholders. So once we have the empathy model and we create that matrix for different areas, then we create persona, 5WNH questions, the laddering questions. And then how do we approach that is this way. Another method which some of you must have already known is called the journey map. A journey map is nothing but, if you see here, it is negative experience and positive experience on the scale, and horizontal is time. And we take up different aspects of a startup. It could be, make it simpler. Let's say our product usage. So when we talk of our product usage, or the learning, it will have the first mile, that when I send out something, people will inquire. That itself is one step. We can create a journey map on that. Once they come to it, how do they find what we are doing? Could be a second journey. Now, how do they make decision about taking our service? How do they make the payment for it? Then we come to the next stakeholder, and of course the later experience and retaining them. If we come to the user, which is our child, what is how do they get the first exercise? That could be a small thing. When do they feel while they're doing the exercise? So pre-exercise, while doing it, and post-exercise could be different journey maps for the same. So journey map could be used in any experience kind of a situation to get to the root cause. Now, how do we do that? Is once we create a journey map, we already have these negative points here. How do we try to address the negative points? Sometimes it is very simple, as we can see here. Sometimes we will go back to our stakeholders to understand with them that how do they think that we should cover this. Like Saurabh was mentioning, co-creating and collaborating with some of the people in order to engage them and relieve them from anxiety to work with us. So I hope we are able to get to the sequence of what I was trying to address. The sequence is understanding empathy at 3 levels, stakeholders, different areas of startup that we want to test out. We make a matrix. Then we create personas of key stakeholder, create 5WNH at the first level for each stakeholder, create the 7 why questions when we go some direction for that. And then while we implement it, we could use the method of what you saw before as how should we conduct an interview and use a journey map to dig into deeper insights. So here we will stop for a minute and get into question answers for how do we use the whole step of empathy. So I'm sure, friends, that one key thing I always look at from empathy is that it is not a simple, easy to use term. It can be used scientifically very well, though it looks like it's more on a creative exercise, a human exercise, but an approach to getting answers can come by this framework. Yes, so open to understanding that, friends. Let us look at where we started, that using empathy for evaluation purpose.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So if you could give 1 or 2 examples so that our other friends can also, because that's where we started, and it will give me the belief that this was useful. So I know it's useful because that's the method, but how could we actually help today with any 1 or 2 points there?
Yeah, just one more thing.
Yes, please.
Can I share actually a small video, if you don't mind? Is it possible?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the meantime, any questions, friends, because we're just running out of time. So any questions on the approach that we used, that could be helpful so that if we found anything challenging here, it's again, I'll repeat, a very structured one. First, we create a matrix for empathy, cognitive, social, emotional, and empathetic concern, the stakeholders on the right for a topic. It could be a topic, could be pedagogy, approach, team, partner, anything. Then we create the personas, the 5WNH questions on the area we want to ask, and then apply a laddering technique, that is 7 whys, to get to the root cause. How do we go about? It is also the way we ask our questions to get to the root and the journey map. Okay, let's hear from Prem since he's sharing.
Yeah, so this is just one of the projects.
Yeah, I can understand, Manas. Yes, please.
Yeah. So the idea here is so students are taught, say for example, in a maths class, they're taught calculus, they're taught trigonometry, and they're taught certain. In a computer science class, say they're taught Python. And in the electronics class, they are taught about circuits. Now, about how to design circuits, some basic Arduino programming or Python programming or something. Now, the question is, in a Python class, so what we could do is, we can teach 2 things. It's a very simple thing. It's not as complicated actually as it sounds. About how to convert voice into text. Okay, it uses APIs, Google API, Microsoft API, there are many APIs. So we can use one of these online APIs to turn voice into text. Now, the question is, now also they learn how to light LEDs, as I mentioned before. Now, what I ask the students is to, come out with a program wherein you integrate these 2. Okay, now this is their evaluation. Whether if they have understood both the things properly, they can bring the 2 together, and then now and come out with a product, which is now available for my evaluation to understand, whether they really understood what input is. What's the input here? It's voice. So let me just show you what they've done.
Right. I can hear quite scratchy, but.
Yeah, I think so. What is happening is that the colors are being commanded, and that particular color glows up. gloves.
That's right.
So
That's right.
the students have brought two different skills together, and they have integrated that, and
Yes.
they came out with it. They used design thinking, which you covered last time, and came out with with a design that can actually go into your product.
That's right.
So that's the whole this one. I
got that. So my suggestion is that for our academic purpose as well as application, whatever we did today, can you find an alternative evaluation method by using what we discussed today?
Sure.
It would be very interesting, because what may happen is that sometimes there are certain ways that can suddenly be meaningful if looked at from a different lens. So let's try that. That will challenge ourselves and see that can there be an interesting method there. So thanks, Karan bhai. You'll have to excuse me. Thanks, Saurav, and thanks to Prem bhai and our other friends who actively participate. So thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good wishes.
Thank you.